for every lore and mythology. Now, eventually, with the Ator, with the Atorians, they then travel up to the surface moon where they then establish trade with humans and Elvens. and eventually, the Phi language and customs are born, with Phi being the spoken language on Phi, being the top behind Elven and Atorian languages, and Icar, languages of the Icar mountain tribes. There's also kingdoms on Phi, and other races too that emerge too. There's the mysterious ancient Treetigans, who are basically sentient trees. Basically like ants, basically. And the Treetigans, they have their own language too, and they have their own theory, and there's a theory that the Treetigans aren't actually native of Phi, but they came from another world. Basically, the Treetigans, they have their own language. Basically, pretty much all Phi inhabitants have their own languages and cultures, basically. But they all exist and live on the same world. On the same world. With some of them even speaking Phi, even some dialects of Phi. Now, the humans on Phi, they established kingdoms where some even retreat to the north. Eventually, another sub-race of humans, actually in the north, called the Tokan, basically live in the north, in the northern continents of Phi. Live in the northern. Now the Tokan, they basically have a Viking, like, they basically have like Vikings. And the Tokan developing their own splinter factions in different tribes, developing their own kingdoms and lands. Eventually, nations of Phi begin having wars amongst each other. But then Phi begins, and then many of the human kingdoms on Phi begin developing nobilities. Eventually the lineage. Eventually, some of these kingdoms form a unified faction called the Aligned Kingdoms of Phi. The Aligned Kingdoms of Phi being created as a way to put eventually on a planet of Phi there would be an invasion, a mysterious invasion war by a race called the Argoians, who are basically savage part. Whereas the Argoians invade Phi, but basically a lot of kingdoms of Phi end up unifying to form the Aligned Kingdoms of Phi, a faction that basically consists of different kingdoms. Assumption possession of the unified Phi kingdoms. The rank of Phi King being a title of Phi King being established. Eventually, when many kingdoms of Phi begin to select their finest warriors, and these becoming the first generation of Phi Knights. Imbued with magic, and magic around this time has become